All right, 3, 2, 1.
So welcome everyone to how Azure Logic Apps helps you do more. I realize this title is a little vague, so let me try to clarify that a tad bit. So when we're looking at Azure Logic Apps, we are looking to build application workflows faster and ultimately with less work. So that is our target topic today, and I'm glad you all could join us on this beautiful Friday afternoon. So a little bit about me before we get started. My name is Mark Runyon. I am a director of consulting with Improving. I work out of our Atlanta office, and I am a frequent contributor to both InformationWeek and the Enterprisers project. I just wrote an article around delegation, how executives can become more effective delegators for Enterprisers project a couple weeks ago. And then I have one coming up around upskilling workers for AI in InformationWeek in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, something like that. So if you are interested in either one of those topics, please check those out. I would love to hear feedback on either one. I have been doing application development for the past 20 years. My first 10 years was in the financial services space. And since I've been a consultant, I've worked the gamut from logistics to pharmaceuticals and banking, education, really everything you can think of. So it's been an interesting road, to say the least. So for our topic today, normally we do key takeaways at the end of the conversation, but I like to put them at the beginning to kind of highlight what I think is important for us to discuss today and what really is a successful conclusion and takeaway at the end. So 3 main things we're going to take a look at today is just the basics, understanding of the logic apps. You know, how do these work? Basically, we are automating and orchestrating workflows and tasks within the Azure cloud. And in that, we have 300 plus connectors that we can tap into. These could be Microsoft services. They could be third-party services like Salesforce, Twitter. We could be jumping over to the AWS cloud. Maybe we're managing S3 buckets or something over there. So we have lots of liberty and things that we can do within the logic app space. Also, we want to look at how to set up and manage a logic app. So first, I like to take a look at some example workflows to give you some ideas around here's a few things that you could do within logic apps to get the ideas going so that you could potentially start thinking about ways that you could change your own application space to leverage this service and this technology. We'll also walk through setting one up, kind of a simpler example within the Azure console so you can kind of see it from beginning to end. And then we can also set these up within, say, Visual Studio. So that's kind of a nice feature for the developers out there, not having to leave their natural environment to jump over to, say, the Azure console to do their development. And then finally, we want to kind of bring all this together and ask ourselves, can logic apps help our environment, help our company, help our application? So where are the workflows that don't quite work right? Where are the processes that can be enhanced by adding logic apps to our existing flow? So first, we've mentioned logic apps a lot here, so it definitely helps to talk about exactly what is a logic app. Our diagram here kind of shows a workflow that a company would have, and you'll notice right here, smack in the middle, we have 2 logic apps kind of being the glue to hold this whole orchestration process together. And that's kind of the easiest way to think about it and to look at it. This is a cloud service that helps us to automate and orchestrate workflows, tasks, and business processes. So through this, we are trying to integrate systems that maybe don't naturally work together, or it takes a lot of work to get them to work together. So before logic apps, or even outside of logic apps, we could still say take the software developer kit for Twitter or something like that, and go at it from that angle to tap into their open APIs and things we can do. Through logic apps, they just put a wrapper around that service and that API that we can readily tap into and take advantage of everything that OpenIT API has to offer. So, and of course, being within the Azure cloud, this easily scales up and scales down as we need it to. We don't have to worry about performance headaches and what if we have that Black Friday event where we have to accommodate this wave of traffic that's going to come at us? What if it's 4 o'clock in the morning? We don't want to get charged for these resources over here that aren't being utilized. So it does utilize that cost per usage model that works really well in the cloud environment. So another way to look at this is these are business components that we are using within a visual workflow. So when we look at workflows, basically we're just talking about a sequence of tasks that produce either a decision, data, or maybe a notification comes out from that workflow. And these components, these business components that we're talking about, again, we just mentioned, they're just wrappers that are around, say a storage component or processing or communications or something that involves a REST or a SOAP API service that we can leverage to tap into that application or to that third party or another Microsoft service. And Logic Apps obviously isn't the only game in town. This is Microsoft's flavor of this product. AWS has their own piece, which is the simple workflow service. Dell has Boomi. There's Power Automate, which is also in the Microsoft space. If this, then that, Zapier. There's lots of other kind of competing models here that you could potentially tap into and do similar things. They're going to have different features and different approaches, but you could come at it from other ways. And then looking back at this workflow here real quick, just kind of do a very quick walkthrough of how Logic Apps might kind of facilitate this flow. So we have this order that comes in from, say, our website, and it hits an API. That API, plugs into Application Insights and logs what it needs to around performance and errors and whatever it needs to. And so it's going to throw a message over to our service bus to say, hey, some action needs to be taken on this order that just came in. Maybe we need to run it through fulfillment. Maybe it needs to go through an approval process. Something needs to happen. So that's where Logic Apps comes in. It says, okay, I'm sitting here polling that service bus, looking for new messages. I know they're coming. And then once I find one, I'm going to pull it in and say, I have to take action on this message. I have to, like you said, I may need to reach out for a notification for somebody in a certain department. I may need to just go ahead and log that over to the do the fulfillment side of things. With this workflow, we're basically just logging that straight to our orders collection database, which is hitting our Azure function that we have created over here. And that is pulling it all the way across to another Logic app, which is sending out our notification and actually fulfilling that transaction, as well as fueling our Power BI. So that is kind of in a nutshell is our flow, and it shows kind of how pivotal Logic Apps can be in that overall process. So key benefits to look at. Our first four are things that we readily associate with the cloud. So we don't have setup costs when we create our Logic Apps. We don't have to worry about performance concerns. Our scalability, it's taken care of. We can hook this into the built-in monitoring to gather insights from our application and from our workflow. So those we all accept it at this point. These are benefits of the cloud. This is why we move these processes there. But when it comes to Logic Apps as a whole, we are trying to create these business processes and flows, visually speaking. So this is all managed through a visual editor interface where we can go and we can create each trigger, each action, and pretty much just define within that visual element what needs to happen within this workflow. It can be done by a business analyst. This does not have to be a programmer that's working on this. And that's kind of the beauty of this, is we can quickly build these very powerful workflows with not a lot of expertise that has to go into, well, how do we write this conditional for loop, and how do we do some of the heavier lifting things that happen on the development side? We don't have to worry about that as much with logic apps. And we can easily integrate our logic apps with our entire application suite. So we can access these from our website, from our mobile devices, from other APIs. We have lots of flexibility with what we can do with our logic apps. So we'll go into a little bit more detail a few slides away as to what these logic app flows look like. But I just want to take a minute to give you some thoughts as to how we might use these, how we might put these into practice. So a few things. We could use logic apps to, say, toggle features on and off within our applications. We could use them to post a message to Slack or Teams when a critical event happens within, say, our application or our service. We can move files from, say, our FTP server up to blob storage, something a lot of us need to do to take advantage and even move them around within blob storage to say hot storage versus cool or archive storage to make sure that we're getting billed appropriately. And then this last one actually came up the first time I gave this demonstration, probably about a year ago. One of our SQL consultants, they were talking about how they had used logic apps within Azure SQL to increase and decrease resources within that service, which I thought was kind of a clever approach. Makes all the sense in the world, but it's one I hadn't really thought through. So a few of you may be thinking to yourselves, well, this is great, but I've seen this product before. It was called Microsoft Flow, or now Power Automate. And for those who aren't aware, Microsoft Flow is now Power Automate. It went through a rebranding 6-9 months ago, something like that. And now it is more closely tied in with the Office 365 suite. And there's lots of similarities between these two products. And there's a reason for that. Power Automate is actually built on top of logic apps. So it is the more non-IT programmer professional vehicle for creating workflows. It is less powerful. You're going to have less options as to what you can do. It's more in these template-based formats of, okay, we know that lots of people need to do this set of actions and via this trigger. So we are going to give you this template. You plug in your pieces, and from that you now have your workflow. But it is a little bit limiting as to what we can do if we need to say go outside the bounds of our cookie cutter template. So, and one of the nice things is we can actually take a template we create within Power Automate and move that over to logic apps and work on that, expand on it, and sort of take it further, take it to the next step. So with logic apps, we do have more design options. With Power Automate, you have a web interface, just like you would with logic apps. With logic apps, you can also manage that within Visual Studio. You can take that JSON block that gets created from the logic app save out process and now use that or tweak that. Take it to another Azure account. Do whatever you need to do it. You have lots of flexibility through the logic app interface. There's three main kind of things that stand out outside of that, and the first one is cost. So Power Automate is much more cost friendly. It is basically built in, as I said, it was tied very closely to Office 365. So as long as you have a user license on my Office 365, you have access to Power Automate and can build your flows and build what you need to do. Logic apps is going to follow very much the Azure cloud pricing model of cost based on our usage. So every time we execute that logic app, we are going to get charged based off those executions. So again, it gives us more, it allows us a little bit more flexibility, but we do pay the price for that. And we also have better security within logic apps as far as having that granularity to really define who can get in and who can get out. Whereas Power Automate doesn't have that level of flexibility on the security side. And the functionality, we can do more with logic apps, like we said, that we can do in Power Automate. So neither one of these is bad products. They're very good products that you have a use case for, say, using one versus the other. The key is who is our audience that we're trying to accommodate, and what are they trying to do? That's really going to kind of drive which one of these we land on. And just so you know, Microsoft Learn has modules around both of these. If you want to dive in and learn more, I highly recommend both of them to kind of get to that power user type place with each one of those services. So connectors. Everything in logic apps is driven off a connector. So this allows us to, say, get data or perform actions or events with our applications, our services, systems. They really are the heart of our workflows, of the automation routine. And so kind of another way to look at this is that component is providing an interface to an external service. So if we're tapping into Twitter, it allows us to send a message, or it will allow us to retrieve tweets around, say, a hashtag or something like that. So that the connector is allowing us to have those, perform those actions against it. And again, as we said before, they are just wrappers that go around that underlying API that we are tapping into. And we've discussed, say, the Microsoft services that we can tap into, as well as the third-party services. But say we need logic apps to interface with our custom application that we built. That's very easy as well. We can create custom connectors that we define that open API or that Postman description to Azure, and they wrap that custom connector for us so that we can include that within our workflow and access it. So the real key there is when we do create custom connectors, we have to have that API available to tap into. So, and kind of the cool thing is once we've created that custom connector, we can obviously use it for personally within our applications. We can pass that off to our partner to let them tap into, or we can even give that to Microsoft and have them certify it for use by the world. So pretty cool stuff of what we can do with our custom connectors. And so we'll see that for every connector, we have an action and we have triggers. So for an action, maybe we have something directed from our user. So maybe we are updating data within our database. It sees that action has happened, and thus we are triggering our flow to take off. Triggers come and vary in a few different formats. So we could be polling data, kind of like in our original example where we're polling the service bus to say, are there any new messages here that I need to process and I need to take action on? It could be a push where we have this API endpoint out here. We're listening for people calling out to it and needing data or needing to trigger our event to occur. So both of these trigger that workflow, and from that, say data is retrieved, notification message is sent off, something happens down the line, but here's kind of where everything starts. So there's a few type of connectors. So first we have our built-in triggers and actions that Microsoft gives us right out of the box, very handy. So things like Azure Functions, set up scheduling, or possibly we need to, say, call out to another logic app. There are lots of these built-in natively built-in triggers and actions that we can take advantage of to get our workflow starting. And this also includes things like controls, so that we can add conditionals to our workflow. So maybe we need to do a for loop. Maybe we need to do an if else to direct our action to go to this place or the other, depending on the input that's given to us. So lots of kind of handy things within that space that we can take advantage of. So next we have our managed API connectors. So with these, we're just tapping into an API that's out there for our given product. So this could be something within the Microsoft suite. It could be, so we're tapping into Dynamics or Azure Service Bus, or maybe we need to send an email out through Outlook. But it doesn't end there. We also have the flexibility to reach out to other third parties. So this could be Salesforce, it could be Twitter, it could be Adobe or Twilio. There's 300 plus connectors out there, and I really recommend if you want to start dabbling and playing with the space, just to scroll through that list and to see what is out there, see what connectors you can tap into, because it is a pretty extensive list. And once you drill down into, say, that Adobe product, it will show you, here's the list of actions that you can take on that to perform whatever action it is you're looking to manage. So again, it's tough to kind of give you the full picture of what's out there. It's one of those things you kind of have to explore for yourself and say, well, our application heavily uses these things over here. Does Logic Apps support those, and can we tap into that to really enhance and expand what our applications can do? So from there, we also have on-premise connectors. So, to date, we've really only talked about the cloud. We've talked about things you can do within Azure. We haven't really ventured to on-prem or do anything else, but the reality is most major enterprises work in that hybrid type environment where they have some on-premise resources and they have things in the cloud. So we need to have these two talk to one another, and for this to be hopefully as a seamless experience as possible. So we can tap into that BizTalk server we have on-prem. We can tap into the SQL Server database, or maybe our local instance of SharePoint. To do this, though, we have to have that secure communication channel from the cloud to our on-prem environment. And thus, we have to install and set up our on-premise data gateway to establish that secure connection. So the integrated account connectors, these are kind of a little bit outside the space of this talk. There's some integration guys we have at Improving that really play a lot in the space, but coming from an app dev perspective, this isn't one I'm as familiar with, but definitely need to make everyone aware of it. This is more the enterprise connections kind of thing, where we are transforming and validating XML, where we are encoding and decoding flat files, kind of the stuff we do in the BizTalk type space. So this is really done through that enterprise integration pack. So we have to have an integration account set up to access this. And this is something you would work through with your partner rep at Microsoft and make sure that you have all of the necessaries in place to be able to leverage and work with integrated account connectors. It has its own pricing model. It is definitely a different beast, but there's a lot you can do that before people would have thought, well, I have to have BizTalk on-prem to do this stuff. Well, not necessarily anymore. We can do all of this through Logic Apps now as well. Which brings us to, why would we want to move to Logic Apps from BizTalk? Could we say run both with our environments? Does that make sense? In a lot of cases, yes, it does. So for those out there who don't work with BizTalk much, its demise has been rumored for years, but it's still going very, very strong. I will assure you. We have a client that that has a big resource team that works on nothing but BizTalk, and it is fundamental to their business. So BizTalk Server 2020 just came out a couple years ago, so Microsoft is very much still supporting that, and Logic Apps is not meant to take the place of BizTalk. It is meant to be another option available for the people that need this, that work within the cloud environment, that need scaling, need some of these pieces that BizTalk really can't offer. So BizTalk is still the kind of the king when it comes to on-premise integration. It works really well at what it does, but it has all the headaches that come along with running things on-prem. So we have to procure our hardware, we have to install it, we have to build it, we have to make sure it gets its software updates. We have to do all of that stuff that we are used to with on-prem. Logic Apps obviously doesn't have any of that because it runs as its platform as a service up on the Azure cloud. So the things that it does really well is it can work with all of our Azure services and easily tap into them. It can also work to reach out to our on-prem, say, BizTalk server, and work in conjunction with it and do everything that it needs to do together. So that's the one thing that Logic Apps, where it really excels over BizTalk. And again, there's no reason we can't run both. 75% of large organizations are hybrid integration platforms. Therefore, it makes a lot of sense to say we've had this BizTalk server here for a decade and we're happy with it. We have it configured. It's running really well. But we still need to go to the cloud to do some things. So how can we use Logic Apps to augment what we're already doing here and really get the most out of our integration experience? So when should we use Logic Apps? This is kind of pulling everything together. So this nice little workflow kind of maps everything out, kind of gives it to us in a nice, concise view. So there's 4 things we need to consider here: integration, performance, conditionals, as well as connectors. So our first one, are we trying to connect multiple systems together? That's what Logic Apps does really well. So that is definitely a win and a reason we would kind of move down the path of yes, we do want to use Logic Apps. Our second one is, do we require real-time performance, that low sub-second response time? And this can trip us up if we do have a need for this, because Azure does not guarantee that super fast activation or the enforcement of those real-time constraints when we execute our flow. So if that is a deal breaker for us, then we potentially do need to look at another option. So our next 2 around conditionals and connectors aren't really deal breakers. They can delay us building out our Logic Apps if we don't have these already configured and in place. So if our workflow includes complex business rules, potentially we can set up that complexity within the Azure portal and within those conditional statements. But there's 2 real downsides to that. One, we can't reuse that code. So it's really nice when we do have that packaged up, though. If some other application needs to tap into that complex workflow, it can. So that's where it makes a lot more sense to say package that as an Azure function that the Logic App calls to perform that business rule and then deliver us back a result. Also, the Azure Portal interface isn't awesome for coding. I mean, I would lean on, say, the Visual Studio interface or something where it's a little bit meant for what you're trying to do. So again, this is not a deal breaker, but if we do have that complex logic, let's go ahead and put that in Azure function and call that from our Logic App instead. So lastly, our connectors. Do we have pre-built connectors that are already out there? Do we need to tap into Twitter? Do we need to call Azure Blob Storage? If so, then great. It's ready to go, ready out of the box. We just fill in our account details and fire it off. It's good to go. If we need to create custom connectors, we need to ask, are there REST and SOAP APIs readily available that we can put that wrapper, that custom connector wrapper around and access? If there are, then great. It's not going to be heavy lifting to create the custom connectors, but we have the core APIs in place that we can create those. If we don't have those APIs in place, then obviously that's a prerequisite. We've got to create those before we can even think about putting together our logic app, because there's nothing to tap into. We can't access those. So I thought as a whole, this was a nice little workflow to follow as you're kind of thinking through, does it make sense to go logic apps with my upcoming solution I'm looking to design? So no conversation around Azure or the cloud is complete without pricing. So logic apps comes in a few different pricing varieties. So the first thing to recognize is every action, or every action, the execution of that action is getting charged out at the 0.000025 cost. So that usage model. And they also bill on the standard connector and the enterprise connector. And as you can see with the enterprise connector, it is more expensive to go that route. And if we have multiple actions within our workflow, we need to take that into account. Okay, we have 3 actions in this workflow, so every time we trigger off this workflow, that it's 75 instead of 25. So we definitely need to go into that with that complete picture when we're trying to price out this model. And if you haven't used it already, the Azure pricing calculator is really nice for this. You can kind of plug in all your variables and it will spit out, here's what your monthly cost is going to be, here's what that all looks like. So definitely take advantage of that if that's something you are looking to do. And the integrated service environment we discussed with the B2B connections and kind of the heavier lift integration things, that is all done on an hourly basis. So we have our developer and our premium cost. And so again, that's something you would work through with your partner rep and kind of get that all figured out. These are, as you can see, fully isolated, dedicated environments. We're able to connect securely between the cloud and on-premise. So yeah, definitely worth exploring and finding out a little bit more about that if that's something that you guys need. So now we're going to take a look at some sample workflows before we step into the Azure portal and actually walk through setting one of these up. So I thought this was a really nice visual representation of a workflow. So we can see it without any of the technical stuff going on. So we have our order that comes in from the website. We log that to our CRM system, and from there we have to do a limit check. So our customer has ordered 1,500 widgets from our website, and based off of that check, that conditional check, we are saying, okay, well, a special action has to happen with this order. We have to have somebody approve this order before we can fulfill it, or we can just send it on to delivery. But on the other hand, if it's less than 1,000, we're comfortable with it. We don't need to add any extra red tape or bureaucracy to our process. We can just go ahead and send that to fulfillment and have that be delivered. And then finally, once delivery has occurred, or once they have kind of packaged up our order, we can now send an SMS message to the client saying your order is on its way, here's the tracking number, and thanks for doing business with us. So if we look at that, that is a nice, if I'm looking at it as a programmer, that's a nice little feature with an application. I'm not sure that's an application within and of itself, but there's a lot of things going on. And so if my business analyst is bringing this to me and saying, okay, we need to create this within our application, I'm sitting there going through, okay, well, how many man hours is this going to be? What are our deliverables? What does that look like? You know, there's a decent amount of effort that goes into kind of making all of these pieces happen. But if we go to Logic Apps, this is all that's required to make this happen. Within 30 minutes, we could have this set up, and we could have no programmers involved. This could be our business analyst that brings this to us, could set up the Logic app on their own. So just to walk through that same flow, our new order comes in, and we're getting a JSON string from the order, and from that, we're grabbing the customer number. We are sending those order details through to our Azure function, which again, somebody would have had to set up that Azure function, but not a whole lot of heavy lifting there, just to basically say, okay, well, this order limit that's out here, actually we could have done a conditional there, but actually it does play in a conditional, excuse me. So based off that conditional, we are checking to see if it's 1,000 or less than 1,000, and then taking our action to say email somebody for approval, or go ahead and tap into the webhook of our delivery provider and get that created, and then contact Twilio to send out that SMS message. So as you can see, there's a lot happening here, and we created that workflow very quickly and very simplistically, and it didn't take an entire application development team to make that happen. So this right here is really the power of Logic Apps in my mind, of what the extent of what you can do within a very small space, and without much knowledge from a technical standpoint as well. So here's another one. So again, lots of things happening in this condensed space. We need to manipulate some files. So our request comes in, it gets signed. We have to judge if that signature is valid or not. We have to also judge if is this a publishing job. So if both of those check out, then we're going to run it through our filter counters. We're going to list those files from our folders, and then we're going to create our end file and then send off our success response. So again, lots of stuff is happening here, but we have comprised it all within Logic Apps in this workflow, and it really simplifies what we have to deal with. Our next one is analyzing Twitter sentiment. So I'm sure a few of you out there are saying, why in the heck would we want to analyze Twitter sentiment? You may not, but I assure you your marketing team probably does. When we have customers out there that are bad-mouthing us or unhappy, and putting that on their feed and having the world to digest that, that's potentially infecting our potential customer base, our existing customer base, and really it's a bad look for our company and for our brand. So being able to tackle those issues as they come up, instead of letting them fester, we can help resolve the situation by reaching out to that kind of disgruntled customer instead of just letting it fester and letting it be. So it doesn't make any sense at all to have even a marketing intern sitting there refreshing on a hashtag or your brand name constantly throughout the day. That's a huge waste of resources when we could readily do this through a Logic app and through Azure. So how this would work is we have set up a connector with Twitter that's looking out there and saying, whenever a new tweet is posted, look to see if our hashtag or if our brand name gets mentioned within the whole Twitter universe. And when that does happen, go ahead and send it through this sentiment analyzer to detect, is this a positive message or is this a negative message? And that's actually run through Azure Cognitive Services, which is part of the AI suite. So they can figure out, it can score that message to say, yes, this is a negative message. We need to shoot a message off to customer service to handle this matter. Or if it's a very positive message, maybe we just want to log that to a database and have that available to our marketing team the next time they're trying to put together some promotional things. They can leverage that nice catalog of beautiful things that people have to say about us and our product. So a very important thing for those people and for that department. And then this one is just your standard mailing list. and this one just shows you tapping into MailChimp. So we send in that request to join our list. If everything gets added correctly within MailChimp that we're tapping into, then we go ahead and send them the success message. If not, maybe we send a message off to our application development team to say, hey, for whatever reason, our connection with MailChimp did not go through, and this person was not successfully added. So somebody needs to take action on this. Somebody needs to follow up and make sure this will work. So just 4 examples of how logic apps could be used in the real world. So let's take a second to actually look at the Azure portal and walk through just building a very simplistic logic app per time. So if we're in our Azure portal, we can just search on logic apps and get to that service. So as you can see, I've set up a few demos here for testing purposes. So we can always go into those and manage them, change our workflows, do what's needed. But for this one, we're just going to walk through adding a new one. So first is just our setup. So we need to define, what subscription we're going to house this under, what resource group. I have already created this logic apps resources, so it can live there. For this one, we're going to say demo 1. Keep that unique, and we will house this in East US because that's where I tend to house most things. No need to tap into integration services, and we might want to say log analytics, but for a demo test, we won't need that. Next, we can add our tags. Usually we would to kind of keep our space organized and to leverage those resources. But for now, we're just going to review and create. So it just gives us the details, and we can run our create. And so that's going to take 10 seconds or so to deploy. It's pretty quick. And then once it's succeeded, you get your success message and deployment is complete. So now we can go to our resource. You'll notice that our screen just kind of flickered. So it tried to take us to the management console that we're used to in Azure, but it figured out, wait a minute, they haven't really set anything up for us yet. So I can't manage a resource that hasn't been created yet. So it takes us over to the Logic Apps designer to say, okay, we'll go ahead and you want to set up a logic app, so go ahead and set this thing up before I'm going to let you manage it. So a few things to notice here. We have a few common triggers that they give us to start with. We also have patterns and templates that we can tap into, very similar to the Power Automate side of things, where these are common things that customers have a need to do. So send an email when an item gets added to a SharePoint list or modified. So we can go straight into that template, set up our account details, and it's ready to go. So they make things very painless, especially from the template side of things if you need that. For us, we are going to set up we're going to tap into Slack so that when we have a problem within our application, we can shoot that critical message off to our development team via Slack message. So we're going to do the HTTP request. So we're going to create that API endpoint that we can tap into. And so first we need to define that JSON schema. And I have one already worked up over here, so I will put that in. So that just shows you all of our pieces that we are looking for. And from here, you'll notice that the URL is going to get generated after we save. So we don't need to worry about that now. We'll go ahead and add our next step. And our next step is to tap into Slack. So you'll see we've already used it here, but if we had not, we could either come into all and we could search all of the possibilities that are out there. As you'll see when we scroll through there, Azure VMs, we could do CRM bot. There's an infinite number of options that we could do. But for now, we are going to focus on Slack and drill down into what our options are for Slack. So once we select that, we can create a channel. We can set the do not disturb. For us, we just want to post a message to Slack. So once we've done that, we'll notice that if you're coming at this fresh, it's going to ask you, okay, I need to sync up your Slack account with Logic Apps. You need to give me permission to manage your Slack environment and to post messages. So we would have gotten the message here. Since I have already signed in, it is managing that connection. So as you can see, it's saying, okay, I'm signed in as Mark Runyon to the Innovative Architect Slack channel. If I need to change that, I can always drill down there and reset that connection. So when I do my drop down, it gives me all of the potential channels that are out there within that Slack, that corporate Slack instance. So we're going to choose this Be Bold, which is a very old marketing channel that's not being used by anybody. So we don't disturb people in their day-to-day. And then we need to define our message text. So this could be static text that we provide. Maybe it's like system's down. Somebody needs to take a look at it. It's not a terribly helpful message though. So via our JSON block that we provided, it's saying, okay, well, you can potentially pass in a message variable, and we can give them a custom solution as to, okay, this API endpoint threw an error on this customer number. Therefore, we have the details we need to follow up on that and to resolve the situation. And something else to be aware of is the add new parameter down here. So it gives you lots of things that you could do. One I'm going to check right here is post as user, because if we don't, then we will see it posted. I can drag my screen over here. Something like this. It's going to show up as Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. Not that there's anything terribly wrong with that, but I can't, it's not under my account, so I can't manage that and just delete it away and tidy things up after we finish our demo here. So I'll pull that back over there. So once we do post as user, we have basically set yes. We have basically everything set up to use our new endpoint to post a message to Slack. So we're going to save that. And like you saw before, when we set this up, it's saying, okay, I'm going to provide you guys with that endpoint as soon as you save. So we have, so let's grab, working between windows is fun. Well, let's try to come at it from this side instead. Let's see if I can bring up Postman here. There we go. I was about to have to do it on the other screen and let you guys not watch. So if we put in that endpoint that we've been given, and then from that, we need to put in our body message, which is going to be another JSON block. Grab that. So from that, so we have our message. So this has been a dormant channel we haven't dealt with in years. So if we send that on, we should get back our accepted message. And then if we come over here to our Slack channel, we have our why is this channel so quiet? So as we've seen, you know, what was that? Outside of me talking, we set that up in probably a couple minutes. So very painless way to set up a, admittedly simple, but again, something every application developer needs. We need to alert the team when something critical happens. So this is something that, you know, usually we would have to go into a software SDK and figure out how to tap in and spend a half a day testing and, you know, doing everything that's related to that. And we just set up in a couple of minutes. So pretty nice way to do something that, you know, we all need. So if we come back to our Logic apps, we will see that one we just set up, the demo one. And from that, we can also see all of the things that we can do. So a lot of these things you're used to. You know, we can set up access control through IAM. We could do all of our alerts and set up metrics and diagnostics and all that we normally would do in the Azure space. A few things that are unique to this are the designer view. So from this, we can go in and we can tweak our existing logic app that we've created through that and save that out. We can also look and see what code makes this up. Here's the JSON block that translates into what we just set up. And we also have our version control, which we are used to. Not the hugest fan of how that's done. I would rather do that through our Git and our DevOps pipelines and those sort of things. But we do have that here if we want to use it. So a lot of stuff that you are used to within the Azure space of what you can do. So that is our very quick demo. So getting us back on track here. So getting back to the presentation, we have to kind of circle back and say, okay, why should we be using logic apps? So we are using logic apps when we have workflows that don't quite work, workflows that could be really enhanced by tapping into some third-party services, tapping into some existing Microsoft services, and fresh workflows that we haven't really considered yet. And maybe we're trying to augment our team. Maybe we have some junior developers or things, and that this is a good place to plug them in to learn our systems and to create things that don't take a whole lot of technical expertise. This is a nice way to do that. We can also, this also helps us get more from our applications by integrating with other applications and third-party tools. And also there's that on-prem problem of we have this workflow that's suffering from scalability concerns, performance, cost issues. Logic apps can be a really nice way to resolve some of those problems. So that wraps up the meat of our presentation. So a few things on the resources side, just pointing out, and I've mentioned a few of these along the way, but everything that we did through the demo can be done in the Azure free tier. If you haven't played around with the free tier, I definitely recommend it. You get 30 days for free, you get some Azure credits to do what you want to do. Explore logic apps, explore the whole Azure universe. I highly recommend it. And even if you have gone beyond your 30 days, which I have, all you have to do is set up a credit card, and basically you can still do a lot of stuff in that space for either little to no cost. I think I get a bill each month for like 20 cents. So highly recommend it. From the articles and learning side, I definitely recommend checking out the connector reference. So just to see what is possible, what is out there within logic apps that we can tap into. It gives you a lot of ideas of how can we augment our applications, how can we add new workflows to it. And then the second link here is the one I referred to before, the Microsoft Learn. I hadn't gone through that before giving this presentation. I went through it, and there wasn't anything that I didn't know before, but what I really liked about their presentation was they presented things in a little bit clearer light than I had. So I kind of stole a few of their ideas and pulled them into this presentation. So again, I really like how they presented the data around or the processes around logic apps. It's very easy to understand and very easy to jump in and learn. Lastly, my email, my Twitter and LinkedIn. Love to connect with all of you if you want to reach out, or if you just have questions, say tomorrow or a month, a year down the line, I am available. So love to talk with you more about it and see how you can make logic apps work for you and how you can help your business with automation of workflows. So are there any questions?
Do not have any questions for you.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us again, and I hope you got a lot out of this, and I hope you will join us at some of our future sessions on our upcoming Fridays. Till then, I hope you all have a great weekend, and we hope to see you all soon.